What's up, guys? So, I've been playing Call of Duty for a very long time, and I thought today, why don't we rank every single Call of Duty game that I have really played and put a lot of time into. Now, this is going to include pretty much almost every single PS4 COD, so from basic um, Call of Duty Ghost all the way up to Black Ops 6. I don't have Black Ops 7 because, me personally, I don't think that game looks very good, and unfortunately, we won't be ranking I guess we'll say the Golden Age CODs. I do own all of them for PS3, but the issue is that it's not easy to record gameplay for those Call of Duties, and I haven't really put a lot of time into those because I wasn't really playing much video games, obviously, when when those games were popular. So and those games just really aren't that like stable anymore in terms of players and like hackers. So I played all the campaigns of those games. It's just that I don't think it would be fair to rank all those games. But every Call of Duty game after almost every Call of Duty game after Black Ops 2, I played a decent amount of time into, and I'm feeling that those games are going to be fair enough to rank, and we will rank all of them based on multiplayer, zombies, campaign. Multiplayer is going to be the big factor, and then I won't really be including Warzone because, to be honest, I wasn't really the biggest fan of Warzone, but so mainly just going to be on the main three big categories, just multiplayer, campaign, zombies, or whatever the third or like fourth mode is. So hopefully you enjoy this video. Now, coming at our number 13th spot at dead last, we have Call of Duty Advanced Warfare. Now, I don't really like this game for a lot of reasons, because number one, I don't think the campaign is that great. It just feels like just another basic kind of like action movie type of campaign. Kevin Spacey is a pretty cool villain, and if they were ever to do Advanced Warfare 2, they probably can't because, Kevin Spacey doesn't really have the best reputation anymore. But anyways, the multiplayer, like since it was the first advanced movement COD, the advanced movement doesn't feel as smooth as a game like Black Ops 3 or Infinite Warfare, but those games have much smoother advanced movement mechanics. And this game also had some of the most broken weapons, like obviously the Bal 27, you also have loot boxes and stuff like that, and it just completely broke the game in my opinion. And Exo Zombies, that's the third mode, and you can't even play it because all the maps are paid walled. It's not like you even get a free map, so I'm not gonna pay money to pay Exo Zombies for an 11-year-old game. I'm just not gonna do that. So you can say that's not fair, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you have to pay for it, it's just stupid. I mean, it's not even a Treyarch Zombies, and they also included like the Pick 13 system, which is a little different from the Pick 10 system. The Pick 13 system works where, unlike the Pick 10 system, you get you get one thing per item. Like you get like a gun, that's 1 point. Attachment, that's another point. So it's the Pick 13 system because they include score streaks into it now. So where score streaks count towards your they can be in that point thing instead, and that's why it's 3 more, because usually you have like 3 score streaks. But overall, my biggest criticism is that the movement just isn't as smooth, and the lobbies are very sweaty, and it's just not that fun of a game. And I just think the other advanced movements CODs are just better, and I'm not really the biggest fan of the futuristic genre in Call of Duty. At number 12, we have Infinite Warfare. Now, Infinite Warfare, it's an improvement from Advanced Warfare because obviously the movement's a little bit better, but honestly, Infinite Warfare makes no improvement from Black Ops 3 when it comes to multiplayer. It's a little worse. Some of the map designs with how there's like invisible walls everywhere, I think it's a major problem in Infinite Warfare. The campaign it was alright. I'm not like it wasn't. I know some people really like the campaign. I know like a lot of times people will say like, oh, even if this COD is a bad multiplayer, the campaign's pretty good. But like, I think the campaign was alright. I only played it once. I only really played most COD campaigns once because they're not really that replayable, and it is true with Infinite Warfare. Obviously you have supply drops, but the multiplayer was just, I don't even know what to say about it, because you obviously had that when Infinite Warfare was first releasing. You had that one trailer where that guy was like, "Oh, COD has never changed so much, even though it's basically the same game." And the zombies is just, it's all right. Infinite Warfare Zombies is all right. Zombies in Spaceland is a pretty good multiplayer map, or pretty good zombies map. I would probably say it's like up there in the top 20 zombies maps, but all the other ones are not that great, to be honest. Like, they're okay. Um, I really got nothing else to really say about this game. It's just kind of basic, and it's definitely overhated. Like, I wouldn't say it's like the worst Call of Duty game. And maybe you can, I don't know. It's just not. It's not that bad. It's definitely overhated, but it's still not that great of a game. At number 11, we have Call of Duty World War II. Now, this might sound kind of controversial, putting it at the 11th spot, but in my opinion, I have a lot of issues with Call of Duty World War II. For number one, was the campaign. I thought the campaign was pretty decent. It was a pretty kind of like emotional story and all that stuff, but it only focused on one set of characters in the, I guess I want to say the Western Front, when you had previous games like World at War that expanded to, the Pacific and the Eastern Front. But this just solely focused on France, which isn't necessarily bad, but it only, obviously World War II, I mean, it's a Call of World War for a reason, and it only really covered one part of the war. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because you're able to give more depth to these characters. It's just, to me, I really like World War II, like history, and to be honest, with it only exploring one front, I didn't really like it that much because of that, but it was at least a somewhat good emotional story. It was a pretty good one. With the multiplayer, one of my big issues with the multiplayer is just that the maps weren't that great. Most of them were pretty basic 3-lane maps with pretty much no variety. Also the new class system, and they did the whole overhaul, but it was still kind of different. Instead of the traditional, pick 10 system. I believe you still had the pick 10 system, but it was changed with the, what was it, like the inventories and stuff like that. So it was a little different. And you still had loot boxes, of course, and a lot of the cosmetics were pretty bad, like the pistol grips, the infamous pistol grips. You can't even tell which ones you got. But overall, the multiplayer was pretty fun, in my opinion. Also, the zombies. The zombies was pretty horrifying. Now, the only map you get with buying the game is the Final Reich, which is a pretty cool map. It is probably in my opinion, maybe behind World at War for being the most terrifying zombies in terms of it's pretty scary. Because obviously Black Ops 3 the zombies wasn't really that scary, although it was probably the best zombies game. Black Ops 3 still, and like Infinite Warfare still weren't, scary games. They were good gameplay wise, but the atmosphere was, in terms of its horror, was not that great. And that's really all I gotta say about World War II. Is just the maps just weren't that good, and the zombies was kind of forgettable, and reality, like, they kind of just basically, I feel like the developers, Sledgehammer, they basically try to like not really go too and far with like the whole like World War II setting and all that stuff. Like the factions, I believe, are just allies, and Axis is like, it's very basic, and I think they could have done a much better job like actually diving into like factions and stuff like that, like they did in World at War. At the number 10 spot, we have Call of Duty Ghosts, and this game is pretty overhated. It's not the worst Call of Duty, but it definitely has a lot of issues. I thought the campaign was pretty good, it is a pretty forgettable campaign. It was pretty action-packed and all that stuff. Even predicted the whole Venezuela thing, where you're abducting the leader, or you're trying to abduct the leader or whatever. So that was kind of interesting, and but it was still forgettable. We never really got a sequel to that plot twist ending, which was kind of unfortunate, but the game was pretty hated, so I understand why Infinity Ward didn't want to make a sequel to that game, but it kind of, I don't know, I just didn't like how they didn't make a sequel, and the plot twist ending, I didn't like how it wasn't followed up. For the multiplayer, obviously the maps were pretty large, obviously, and the time to kill was pretty fast, but I'm not necessarily totally against like a fast time to kill, it makes, so you actually have to think, and you don't just run with your head cut off, and you actually have to think strategically about what you're doing and what actions you're going to do. And I know a lot of the maps were like mazes and stuff, which is pretty unfortunate, but a lot of the DLC maps were a lot more refined and a lot more better, smaller, compactor, and the maps were also very detailed. They're very unique. I mean, you obviously there's maps that were like in the desert. You had Stonehaven, which was a pretty awful map, but at least it was pretty unique, like kind of like a castle. And, there were some snow maps too, so it was a pretty diverse map set. And I really like the setting of Call of Duty Ghosts, where it's like the apocalypse. It's like kind of modern, kind of more futuristic modern. I believe the game takes place in 2028, so if you get that type of setting, I think also the stories, the campaign, like the whole setting with the Federation and, all these Latin American countries uniting together and fighting the United States, and our characters, they're in the apocalypse, basically. I think that's pretty cool. And the other thing this game brought on was Extinction, and I can't really say I really put much time into Extinction. And honestly, the mode is very repetitive in my opinion, and I just didn't really like it that much. It's interesting, it's a unique twist, but I definitely think in the future, if Infinity Ward ever wants to come back to Call of Duty Ghosts, considering how a lot of people are getting kind of franchise fatigue with the Modern Warfare and Black Ops games, if they ever want to return to Ghost, I think one of the main things they should do with the Extinction is just make it less repetitive, and maybe more or at least trying to be a little more unique, because it was just way too repetitive. At number 9, I have Call of Duty Vanguard. Now, I put this game above World War II in my opinion, because I just thought the multiplayer was a lot funner in my opinion. It was definitely probably a little too chaotic, but it was still very fun. But the reason why it's not really higher is because, well, let's start off with the campaign. The campaign, one of my big issues with the campaign is that it's too many, I know World War II I complained about how it was all in the Western Front in France, but in Vanguard, it's literally all over the place. It's in Africa, Asia, Japan, D-Day, Stalingrad. It's all over the place, and basically the whole premise of the story is that all these characters are coming together, and they're called the Vanguard, obviously. That's what the game's called. And they come all together, and they're storming Berlin. And it's just, I don't really like how, number one, pretty much the entire game is flashbacks. The only missions that aren't flashbacks, and probably the two best missions are the first and last missions, which all the characters are together fighting in Germany. And I just think it was too much, and you only 2 missions where all the characters are together, and they build all these backstories and all the characters, and it just takes up the entire campaign, and you really don't get to see much how these characters, interact with each other and really build and team build and all that stuff. So that was my biggest issue with the campaign. Also, the historical inaccuracy. This game had probably some of the worst historical accuracy for a World War II game Call of Duty has pretty much ever made. It was worse than World War II and World at War, which weren't that bad. World at War was probably the most accurate one, I would probably want to say, because it was the most, I guess you want to say, grittiest of the 3 games. And World War II and Vanguard kind of felt like this didn't feel as gritty as World at War. And when we go over to the multiplayer side, One of my big issues in the multiplayer, obviously, is that it's a very fast-paced game, and also there's just really not a lot of identity with the game. You know, you could play as Godzilla, like that's one of the operator's skins. There's Attack on Titan, and it just doesn't really feel like you're actually fighting in World War II. And the factions, they literally called the factions my team and enemy team. Now World War II was also very basic, you know, it was just Allies versus Axis, but they went even lower. Sledgehammer went even lower and just did my team and enemy team. Instead of, you know, Germany, United States, you know, Russia, Soviet Union, France, you know, you had all these different countries in World War II. It was a gigantic war, and the most creative thing they were able to push out was my team and enemy team. So that's one of the things that I didn't really like. But overall, it's still a fun multiplayer. In terms of just gameplay, you know, it was definitely very fast-paced, obviously, like I said. And they implemented combat pacing, which allowed you to play, I believe, like 6v6, you know, 10v10, 12v12, like all that stuff. So if you want to have like just pure chaos, like a 12v12 on a small map, you can go for it. Although that's probably not the best way to play this game. And then probably one of the worst things about this game is just zombies. Zombies is just like this. Arguably, had one of the worst zombies, and it's really unfortunate because I think this game, Cold War, was a pretty decent zombies experience. The game that released before Vanguard, and that game had pretty good zombies, considering what we had recently when it was released. They removed round-based zombies initially. They were like, you do this like objective stuff, and it really didn't like fall that well with the community. And personally, I just like round-based zombies and not doing this objective stuff. And it got pretty repetitive. Like you would do the same objectives over and over and over again, and they would include stuff like armored enemies. They would give zombies machine guns, which is just dumb. Just unavoidable projectiles being launched at you. And overall, another point with the multiplayer, it was also very similar to Modern Warfare. It's just a lot more fast-paced. I mean, you could pretty much say this is a World War II skin for Modern Warfare 2019. I mean, but worse than Modern Warfare 2019. That's probably one of the best things, the best descriptors I could think of Vanguard. But overall, still fun multiplayer, but just when it comes to historical accuracy and identity, it lacks severely, and that's why it's at the number 9 spot. At number 8, we have Black Ops 4. Now, one of my big issues with Black Ops 4 is that no campaign, number one, which I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of campaigns, but I don't know, it's whatever. I mean, no campaign. You had Blackout, which I didn't really put a lot of time in the Blackout. Fortnite obviously was in its prime, so really, honestly, not many people were playing Blackout to even begin with. But I heard it's like, some people think it's better than Warzone. I don't think it's better than like Prime Warzone, like 2020 Quarantine Warzone. And I just think that Warzone is just better. And multiplayer, the maps were alright. You know, can't really say much about them. They were also pretty generic. Now, one thing I did like about this game was the higher time to kill, and if you wanted to heal instantly and regenerate health instantly, you had to have a stim shot, which I think was a pretty interesting concept. It set a pretty high skill gap, and I think if you got good at the game, it was definitely pretty fun, and it took a decent amount of skill to be good. You had supply drops still, but there were still a lot of decent base game weapons. And then Zombies. Zombies was also very controversial. A lot of the maps were very complicated and very hard Easter eggs. But I still think Zombies was pretty fun in this game. Although they did change the perk system, I didn't really mind it that much. I still think Zombies was pretty good. I know at the end with like some of the DLC maps, Treyarch got pretty lazy, and you know they didn't want to animate some of the certain like cutscenes. Or they didn't have like, I guess I want to say like, it was like 2D cutscenes instead of 3D cutscenes like you would see in like Black Ops 3 and the launch Black Ops 4 maps, if you know what I'm saying. But overall, it's a pretty good game, and that's why it's at the number 8 spot. At number 2, we have Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 2022. So, not to confuse with Modern Warfare 2 2009, but Modern Warfare 2 2022, or I'll just call it Modern Warfare 2022. One of my big issues with this game is the perk system. The perk system was changed, and it's based on the longer you're in the game, the match for, the better perks you get. You unlock your higher tier perks, which I think its original benefits were to obviously, not have you have the most overpowered perks right at the start of the game, but it did create like an imbalance, and sometimes if you would join a match mid-game, you couldn't really get those higher tier perks in the middle of the game. So sometimes that wouldn't work. And the campaign, it was a step down from Modern Warfare 2019, but I still think it was a pretty good campaign overall. I didn't really play DMZ really that much, or raids, or really any other third modes. I'm not really a big fan of like the non-Treyarch third modes in my opinion. And I think there was definitely some improvements from Modern Warfare 2019. I know a lot of people like complained about how the game was too slow. I thought it was alright I thought the speed was alright. At least when I was playing it a couple days ago, I thought it was a pretty good. I don't think we really need a super fast Call of Duty game, where you just run around with your head chopped off and just not really play the objective, or just focus on getting kills and not really think much. And if you actually, a lot of people will complain about campers, but for the most part, if you actually play tactical and you don't just running like full blown sprinting it through doors, running into buildings, campers are not as annoying. They still can be annoying because really shotguns in this new Modern Warfare series have been pretty overpowered. And Dead Silence. Dead Silence still isn't a perk, but I still think Modern Warfare 2022 is a decent game. I think it's a little bit of a step down from 2019, but it's still pretty fun. Another, some improvements that Modern Warfare 2 did against Modern Warfare 2019 would probably be the camo grind. The camo grind was made a lot less tedious. It was pretty easy to get gold for a weapon, and I really appreciate that. Another thing was also the blueprints. Obviously, Modern Warfare 2019 introduced blueprints, and basically what it did was that if you put a different attachment other than what the original blueprint had, for example, Modern Warfare 2019 Cold War Vanguard, it would pretty much destroy your blueprint, or just make it look very ugly if you put a different attachment on than what the blueprint originally had. Modern Warfare 2022 fixed that problem. Every attachment you put on your gun, even if it's not part of the original blueprint, it will basically make it look like a normal, how it is when you originally bought the blueprint. At the number 6 spot, we have Modern Warfare Remastered. This game is just, the campaign is just amazing. This is obviously the remastered of COD 4, released in 2007, and released in 2016 along with Infinite Warfare, and this game is just pretty good. The campaign is phenomenal. It isn't really that replayable, but it's still an amazing story. The multiplayer, it's pretty basic. I don't really have much to say because of how basic this game is, but it's still such a fun game to get onto and grind out. And it really put Call of Duty on the map, the original COD 4. And, with the introduction of Prestige, camos, probably the most revolutionary COD pretty much we've ever seen. It really put this game on the map. And it's only on this list because of the remastered version. I do have the original version, which pretty much both games are identical. But at least Modern Warfare Remastered, it's much easier to find lobbies. And it's also, I know there's a lot of annoying things about the multiplayer, like the, Juggernaut, um, stopping power, last stand, that one grenade perk where if you die, you drop a grenade. A lot of annoying stuff like that, but the maps are all fantastic. It really fits the atmosphere of Modern Warfare, and that's why it's at the number 6 spot. Coming at the number 5 spot was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019. This is also probably one of the most revolutionary Call of Duties since Call of Duty 4. It made numerous improvements compared to predecessors like Black Ops 4 and World War II. Getting rid of supply drops, that was an amazing thing. And free DLC maps, that was another great. So you no longer pay DLC for maps, weapons, and instead you had the item shop, which, like, down the line, it will have its consequences, but the Modern Warfare 2019 store, its skins, blueprints, really weren't that drastically, I guess you want to say, different from the game's identity and art style. They were all still, like, there were some one-offs, some of the Halloween skins. They were still cool skins, though, like, and it's not like there was any cartoon characters. They were all, most of these collab skins were all from mature IPs, so no, like, SpongeBob or whatever. Another thing was just how revolutionary they changed the create a class system, getting rid of the pick 10 system, and implementing the gunsmith. I believe that's what it's called, the weaponsmith or gunsmith. Pretty much what it is. You're always going to have a primary and secondary, and if it's like a pistol or what. If it's like a pistol, like that's your secondary, and then your primary is most of the time always going to have 5 attachments. If it's a pistol, it's going to have 5 attachments. Pretty good. You're always going to have a lethal and a flashbang. Well, not a flashbang, a lethal and a tactical. You're always going to have those, and you're always going to have 1 perk per slot. And of course, melee, unless you have to put a melee weapon like a knife in your secondary. You can't. No, you no longer just have a knife anymore. The campaign was also pretty gritty, pretty violent, intense, realistic. Clean house was probably one of the best missions in the entire game, where you're, cleaning a house with night vision goggles in like apartment in London. So that was pretty cool, and the campaign was just really gritty, intense, and realistic for that's what I say, like a Call of Duty campaign. And the third mode, I really can't say I really played Spec Ops. I already said I'm not really a big fan of non-Treyarch third modes, and I didn't really play much Spec Ops, and I'm not really a big fan of it. This game also introduced Warzone, which Warzone is like alright. I was never really a big fan of Warzone. Now, Prime Warzone, I liked it a lot, but Warzone has really fallen off, and it's kind of like destroyed Call of Duty. Really what it is, just redirecting resources to Warzone. Some other criticisms of the multiplayer would obviously be no dead silence as a perk. The maps were all very large maps, and a lot of camping. Even though I think if you just play tactically, I think a lot of the camping can be avoided if you don't just run around. If you run around with your head chopped off like a chicken or whatever, if you just do that, I think you should be fine. And really, this is where Call of Duty really looked like it was making a comeback, but it never really went on beyond Modern Warfare 2019. At number 4, we have Modern Warfare 3 2023. In my opinion, this was the complete package for Modern Warfare. I think it was a lot better than Modern Warfare 2019. I think the movement was a little bit faster. The perk system was pretty interesting. And at launch, it was not the complete package, but as time got on, as DLC was added, the multiplayer became very solid. Now there were some criticisms with being able to unlock weapons. Like some of the weapons, like you unlock them, you have to complete daily challenges, which was a pretty big criticism about the game. It's probably one of my biggest criticisms in how this game is called Modern Warfare 3, despite most of the maps being remastered original Modern Warfare 2 maps. And this game was supposed to be a DLC, but it was rebranded as a new game. And it was super obvious to tell, especially the campaign. The campaign was just atrocious. open combat missions are terrible and they really shouldn't ever be implemented. It did not really feel like a Call of Duty campaign, and most of them are pretty boring, and there were so many plot holes and like retcons in the story. It really destroyed. I mean, you just kill a soap off in the end. Literally, like, there's no build up to his death. There's almost no motion. He just gets shot in the head, just dead instantly. Like, one of Makarov's guys just comes around the corner, just kills him. And then also, Graves just magically being alive, I seen he wasn't in the tank. It was just so stupid. The amount of plots and retcons that campaign was just ridiculous. And then zombies was just, Warzone zombies, it was probably just as bad, if not worse, than Vanguard zombies. But the thing that makes us as the fourth spot, so the multiplayer is just very fun, and there isn't really a whole lot of issues with the multiplayer. The only really issues that maybe you could have is that a lot of the Modern Warfare 2 maps were built for, slower movement, like the OG Modern Warfare 2 maps, but it's still fun. So that's why it's at the number 4 spot. At the number 3 spot, we have Black Ops Cold War. Now, this is a Call of Duty I spent a huge amount of time into, and it's a very good Call of Duty. Multiplayer-wise, campaign, even zombies, all pretty great. Now, the campaign is amazing, in my opinion. I just love it a lot. It does have multiple endings, but the multiple endings aren't as complex as Black Ops 2's endings, though. But they're still pretty good, and you still have Black Ops 2 and Black Ops Cold War are the only games to have multiple endings for their campaigns. And Russell Adler is a very cool character. But now with the multiplayer, it kind of felt like a reskin to Modern Warfare 2019, Kinda, I guess you want to say. They removed mantling and all that. They removed mantling and all that stuff. They removed doors. And it was a very more arcadey type of game, more chaotic type of game. And also, they changed the score streak system, basically where you just pile up points in the match. You don't actually, if you die, your points don't really reset. Although, if you do gain up a pretty good streak, the more points you get towards your streaks. But it was very hard to get a high score streak more than once a game, and it was almost impossible with some score streaks like the gunship, which I guess you want to say it's fair, even though it should have been if you were returned to the original score streak system, it still would have been pretty difficult to get a gunship anyway. So I don't know if they were concerned about people getting multiple gunships, but they also implemented probably one of the most annoying score streaks in the game, which was the Air Patrol. Pretty much it just destroys any score streak you have, and it's just pretty annoying, and it wasn't that hard to get either, so. But still very fun multiplayer. Overall, the gunsmith system, very similar to Modern Warfare 19, just include wild cards like any other Black Ops game. Zombies is also pretty fun. My only complaint about zombies is that a lot of the maps really didn't have much of an identity, unfortunately. Mainly because most of them were just facilities, and it just looked very boring. And that's why Cold War's at the number 3 spot. At number 2, we have Black Ops 6. Now, this might seem kind of controversial, but I actually like this game a lot, just despite what other people say. Now, the campaign, I don't think it was as strong as Cold War, mainly because this whole Pantheon group, there's no real historical connection to it, unlike there was a Perseus and Cold War. Although Perseus was a group of people, not just one person, it was still at least a historical connection. And, they hyped up, Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, but they didn't really have many appearances in the campaign like Ronald Reagan did in Black Ops Cold War. That was my complaint with that. Also, the multiplayer, this is where Call of Duty really started to it started with Vanguard, honestly, but this is when we really started to get away from its identity, You had the Beavis and Butthead skins and the Ninja Turtle skins. Now, at the end of the day, I'm not necessarily the biggest hater on that. I don't really necessarily I mind collab skins, but this was a little excessive, and it really kind of broke the immersion, because this game took place in the 1990s during the Gulf War, and it really just breaks the immersion of it, unfortunately. Although it doesn't affect gameplay, so it's not the biggest deal in the world. And the gameplay, it was pretty sweaty, and it was very hard to get some of the higher score streaks, but it's still a pretty fun game, you know. Still same gunsmith system. This game introduced Omni Movement, which was pretty cool at the time. And now Omni Movement isn't really as used as much anymore, but it's still very decent. It's at least unique. But you kind of just jump around over the place. But some of the maps were just kind of brain rot. What was it? Steakhouse. I believe that map was just atrocious. It was just way too small. You couldn't even do score streaks on the map because half the map was, you know, enclosed. So, I don't know, a lot of the maps were just brain rot. There's even some theories that some of the maps were generated by AI, which is kind of crazy. But it was still, like, a fun multiplayer. And then Zombies was alright. Like, it kind of suffered kind of the same problem with Cold War, where I think a lot of the maps just didn't have much of an identity. But like the original maps, like Terminus and I'm forgetting the other map, but the original 2 launch maps or Liberty Falls, I believe that's the other one. Those maps are pretty solid. Some of the DLC maps were kind of but those 2 maps were very good in my opinion. And they also brought back Gobblegums, which was pretty cool, and that's why it's at the number 2 spot. At number 1, we have Black Ops 3. I've put the most amount of hours into this Call of Duty, and this is just such a great Call of Duty. Now, the campaign wasn't great, but again, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of campaigns anyway. Like, I play most campaigns once, and then I'm done. But it was still fun. It was still a decent campaign, even though the story was kind of Like, the story was pretty bad. Didn't really have much of a connection to the Black Ops story, what we saw in Black Ops 1 and 2. But it still had, at least you had 4-player co-op, and then you had all the difficulties and all that stuff. You had realistic difficulty, which was one of the hardest difficulties. You know, 1 bullet, you're dead. And then multiplayer, you had Dark Matter. Now, all the maps were pretty crazy, honestly, too. None of them really fit a set theme. But I still kind of like it how, like, I still like it because Black Ops 3 has, like, this kind of, like, chaos, kind of, like, futuristic, like, AI type of story. And it's just mind-tripping. So I'll give a pass on some of the multiplayer maps. And a lot of them were pretty fun, too. So I'm not going to put too much pressure on that. And this is probably the best jetpacks in the game. It was probably some of the smoothest movement we see in Call of Duty. You still have the Pick 10 system, of course, and you had DLC weapons, but there were so many good, just like base game non-DLC weapons that you couldn't even complain about the DLC weapons just being overpowered, because there were so many like non-DLC weapons that were good, like the VMP, for example. Then when we get over to Zombies, this is where the game probably like shines the best. 14 playable maps. Now, 9 of those are remasters / remakes, but still, if you never played those maps before, you have 9 maps to play, and that's why this game is just so great. So much variety, and if you're on PC, you know, you have the mods on like the Steam Workshop. That's pretty cool, and most of the, I believe at least the majority of those Black Ops 3 Zombies maps, though, including the original maps and the remasters, have Easter eggs. I'm pretty sure every map besides the World at War maps and Kino der Toten have Easter eggs that you could do. So that's just insane. There's so much customizability in this game. There's so much stuff you could do. There's a lot of add-on content, like you know, you got Dead Ups Arcade. You know, you have that one mode with the campaign where you fight against zombies. There's just so much to do in this campaign, or just this game in general, and that's why it's at the number 1 spot. Thanks for watching this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and stay tuned for future content. Goodbye.